parents are here. My right hand, my shoe, and one of my friends from Buffalo many years ago. I remember when you came to God. I feel like I'm home. Lately I've been speaking a lot in churches, so it's nice to be here. So I'll tell you a joke. A child goes to his mother. Most of you have heard my stuff already. A child goes to his mother and says, asks her a question, where do we come from? The mother answers, we're made in the image of God. And he goes to the father and says, where do we come from? She said, we evolved from monkeys. So the child is confused. So he goes back to his mother, and the mother says, it's really not a contradiction. That's my side of the family. But actually, that little joke delineates the essence of the conflict of what we're living through. What is a human being? Do we have, if we're made in the image of God, our lives have sanctity. If we have sanctity, then we have human rights. And if we have human rights, it's not for others, humans, to determine how many of us live on the planet, how long we live, and who should be free. It's God's department, right? If you look at a human being as no different than a monkey, well, monkeys could be bought and sold and slaughtered, and it really depends how high on the food chain you are. It's survival of the fittest, eugenics. And that's the essence of the conflict that we're seeing right now, the ideological conflict. There are a group of people in the world, they think they're evolved, that they live at a higher level of consciousness, when in reality they're nothing more than devolved, not evolved, but devolved pagans of yesterday.
Yeah.
They worship the work of man, not the work of God. And as such, it inevitably leads to a system with three types of categories of people. Like Nietzsche would say, the Superman, the Ubermensch. Then you have the Mensch, the human. And then you have the subhuman, which most of us belong to. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because our arch enemies from 80 years ago viewed themselves, Nazis viewed themselves as descendants of Aryan gods. And as such felt entitled to determine who should be enslaved and who should be slaughtered and turned into dust. Now, that philosophy did not go away. It's resurfaced right now. It's been resurfacing for many years, but it's become obvious to everyone that in this generation, it's not really even anti-Semitic. Unfortunately, most of the perpetrators, or many of the perpetrators, are Jewish. But what it is a godless, pagan, child-sacrificing, idolatrous group of sociopaths that feel entitled to decide how many human beings should be on the planet and how we should live. And all the policies that we've seen in the last 2 years has been an attempt to enslave humanity. And I'll develop all these ideas. By the way, no one should believe a word it's saying. I'll give you all the evidence. No, I mean it. Don't make the same mistake with me as you've done with the government. Maybe not you, but blind faith belongs to God, not to man. Now, with man, you could trust but verify. And I'm going to give you the data. You can verify by doing your own due diligence, use your own God-given mind, skills of reasoning and analytical thought, and come to your own conclusions. So in March of 2020, I found myself in the epicenter of the largest outbreak of COVID in the world, or in America at that time. Monroe, New York, upstate New York. I was a family doctor for almost 2 decades in that community. And when COVID arrived, it spread to everyone immediately. We had thousands of sick patients and no treatment. If you remember in March at that time, all doctors were telling patients was take Tylenol, go home, drink fluids. If and when you get sicker, go to the hospital. And if you ended up in the respirator, the statistics in New York at that time, 85% of people would die. That was the treatment. And it didn't make sense to me, because in every other part of medicine or life, we like to intervene early, get much better results. It's much easier to put out a small fire than a large fire. It's much easier to treat cancer when it's in one place than when it's spread all over, right? Except when it came to COVID, we were not doing anything until patients got very sick, and then they went to the hospital and died. So again, that really didn't make sense to me at all. And I was davening, I was praying to God, because I didn't have anything to, my mother told me about, I think she was the first person to ever tell me to look into hydroxychloroquine. No one knows that. So I was davening just for some help, because I didn't know what to do. And a video was sent to me called MedCram episode 34 on YouTube, Dr. Schultz. That video changed the world, because it reminded me of a way to stop certain types of viruses from making copies of themselves, stopping the spread of the virus. It was a theoretical paper, but it made sense to me. And I viewed this as World War III. I still view it that way. 200 countries, right, are fighting the same enemy. The world economies have been shut down. People were living in, myself included, in fear, doom and gloom. If you listen to the news, you would only hear the impending death, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And so, it was time for battlefield medicine. We didn't have time to take a year to do research, to see the best approach. There's nothing wrong with doing research, but we should try the best we can with what we have in the short term, and in parallel, develop better treatment approaches. And if we do find something better, transition to that. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say Washington, D.C. is carpet bombed. I wouldn't be too upset about that. Now, would it make sense to say, well, we shouldn't shoot at the planes with the bullets we have. Let's do research for a year. Let's find the really nice, shiny, good bullets and use those. Or would it make sense to throw your sneakers at the plane if that would bring them down? Right? Wouldn't it make sense to use what you have in the short term? We're losing 20, 30,000 people a day at some point. So I decided, listen, I was self-employed. I decided I'm going to just improvise, like the Marines say, right? Improvise, adapt, overcome. And without going into the full story, I came up with basically a treatment approach with God's help. And I started giving it to people. And within 6 to 12 hours, they started getting better. Their breathing improved. And I didn't believe it, anecdotal. A fluke. But after 10, 20, 30 patients seeing the same pattern, it stopped being a fluke. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to realize that before people were dying and now they're getting better and they're staying home, right? So with the help of my son, I made a YouTube video to the President of the United States. I didn't know how to make a YouTube video, so he helped me. I don't belong in that generation. And we just sent it out to internet space. And 16 hours later, Mark Meadows, the President's Chief of Staff, calls me on my cell phone. I wouldn't believe it, but it happened to me. And Mark Meadows says to me, "You looking for the President?" Yes? He goes, how can we help you? I said, I'm seeing this. And they were very interested. Keep in mind, there was no one out. I never claimed to have the best solution. I just claimed to have the only solution at that time. And they were really interested. And I had their contact information. And I would give them daily updates. And a few days later, Stephen Hahn, the commissioner of the FDA, called me. He wanted to know what I was doing, and I told him. And he got me in touch with the head people of the NIH, which was a dead end. Because what did I discover? I had real world evidence. I wasn't doing research. I was just trying to keep my patients alive. So in the process of doing that, I generated information. That information seemed important. And I had documentation, I had all the documented, all the data, but it was not a clinical trial. And so they just rejected it. It's like, I'll give you an analogy. Let's say a frontline soldier finds an enemy map, right? And that map tells you where the enemy is, and where the weapons are. Wouldn't it be a good idea to get that information in the hands of the 5-star general so he can win the war? That's how I felt. I have information. I'm not going to wait 2 years until it gets to someone. And that was tragic. But then, a week later, Rudy Giuliani called me and invited me to do a podcast with him. And that podcast went viral. Millions of people saw it. And my life has never been the same since then, good and for bad. I went from upstate, obscure family doctor, country doctor, to being on the world stage overnight. And that brought with it certain nuances that I had never anticipated. I had to learn how to swim with the sharks really quickly. And then when President Trump announced that he's taking hydroxychloroquine, remember that? So he said he got a letter from an upstate New York doctor advising him what to do. And so everyone knew it was me. So it's kind of cool, right? You know, getting that fame, but it stopped being cool like in 2 days. Because then the real horror started. Being vilified, eviscerated in the media. I was on the front page of the New York Times. I wasn't even sure what they're talking about. They were talking about me, like, and then like I'm the biggest villain, you know, right-wing conspiracy kook that, I like Trump, but so what? I was on the front cover of Vanity Fair. You know what these idiots did? They put me on top, Trump underneath, and Stephen Hahn, the head of the FDA, below him. And it looked like the Jew, the protocols of the Elder Giant, trying to rule the world. It was not intentional.
Yeah, not cool. Not cool.
And then the Attorney General, okay, this one maybe I deserved, because I went on national media and I called for the execution of Cuomo. He's a mass murderer, guilty of crimes against humanity. He killed 20,000 nursing home residents. And then on March 27th, he issued an executive order that blocked pharmacies from dispensing hydroxychloroquine, which I was using. And it was a direct attack against my practice and me. I was the only one, to my knowledge, doing it in the state. And he blocked access to this drug. And I was so naive, I even wrote him a letter asking him to reconsider. I have the letter. It's actually useful for historical purposes because it takes away plausible deniability. And I said that he should be taken to The Hague or Nuremberg. And if convicted of crimes against humanity, he should be hung.